Hello and welcome. This is Stylish and Sustainable, and my name is Sabrina. I'm so glad that you are taking time out of your day or your night to sit down and listen. This week, I sat down with Sydney from @Ohhhhh, and her and I had a wonderful discussion about sustainable fashion, body image, and a little bit about just kind of how we can all move towards making Instagram a safe space. Sydney and I focus on how sustainable fashion and positive body image collide, and how the fast fashion world has contributed to negative body image and a serious misunderstanding about what women's bodies look like. Before we dive in, just a quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/stylishandsustainable and browse the awesome selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's seriously that easy, guys. Go to audibletrial.com/stylishandsustainable to get started listening today. All right, guys, without any further ado, let's dive in. All right, Sydney, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very good. And I'm really excited to chat with you today. This is a topic that means a lot to me, and it's a really, it's multi-layered. So we're doing an onion today.
Right.
So we'll start, I think, with the surface level, and we'll just start in a place that's really accessible for people.
Okay.
And I think my question that I ask a lot of my guests is just like, what would you say your why is for living sustainably or buying sustainably or buying with an eco mindset when you go to buying clothes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say my main reason for putting more thought into purchasing sustainably is, of course, for the earth to be treated fairly, but also the humans that are living here. I think that a lot of people think sustainable, at least in the South, most people think of, this hipster that owns like 3 items and lives in a tiny house and drives a Prius and gardens all of their own food. And that's great if people do pertain to that stereotype, but I don't think that that's realistic for most people or something that's easily accessible. Like down here in Baton Rouge, I think we got recycling bins in our homes in like 2013, 14, so like really late. So I think the stereotype is intimidating to a lot of people. There's this famous quote about we don't need 100 people doing low waist perfectly. We need 1 million people doing it imperfectly or something like that. And I think that kind of sums up why in the past couple years, I've really tried to purchase more sustainably. And I think that mentality and like brutal honesty is exactly what people need to see in order to think of shopping sustainably as less intimidating and more inviting, and in order to get them to participate more in it.
Yes, I'm going to give you an amen to that because I think that is the honest truth. And I wish that more people were more transparent about also like how challenging it is to even start making the transition.
Right.
Yeah, that actually kind of leads me into a follow-up question.
Okay.
And we don't have to go super into this because this is loaded, but what is it like trying to live sustainably in the South? Because I know there are totally different mindsets and stuff like that in different parts of the country. What kind of funky things have you come up?
Well, I think the biggest one for me, at least, is we have to drive everywhere. And it's driving a long distance too. So I visit Austin, Texas a lot, and I really admire Austin as a place that is in the South and has, is very immersed in Southern culture, but is progressive still. I think actually they just made a law to where they disacted the ban, but they had a plastic bag ban for a very long time. And the city is very walkable and just conducive of living a little bit more sustainably, as to where, cities in Louisiana, for sake, Um, they are all far apart and require you driving for the most part. And it is very much, if I, whip out my metal straw or my reusable bag, or like at Target, a lot of times I'll go in and buy just one item and won't take a bag. And people look at me like I'm a lunatic for just taking my one item out of the store with my receipt. So I think that is very much like a good preview of just the kind of mentality that people have towards sustainability. Is I do think that it's viewed as such like a remote thing, and yeah, there's all sorts of little oddities in the South that you would never think about. Now, also in that same breath, though, there are, I would say, some ways that, especially in Louisiana, we are make an effort to be a little bit more sustainable in ways that we don't realize, such as a lot of like our agriculture and farming comes very locally and is done by like little old Cajun men. And so we're able to bypass the harmful, um, you know, huge market of agriculture that we see is just so screwed up, and a system that is completely, failing the earth. So, I mean, it is definitely harder in the sense of being progressive, but I do think that there are some little things here and there that the South doesn't realize they're doing right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there is so much value to be able to grow also like the hot climate foods. Whereas, like,
Right.
up here, my bananas have the most insane freaking carbon footprint. Even
Right.
if you guys aren't growing bananas, but if you're growing like warmer climate stuff, at least it's not having to make that crazy
Right.
travel.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. Both sides. And that's a really balanced evaluation. And I kind of expected some of the things you said, but also really interesting. I never would have thought about the commuting distance. But now thinking about that,
Yeah.
when I've been down there, that totally is a thing. It does seem like there's a lot more space between stuff. So I guess kind of back to our regular thread. That was really interesting to hear this, Sydney.
Okay.
Thank you. What caused you to kind of realize, I would say, the wasteful nature of fast fashion, but we can also just say kind of all of the nastiness that goes into the fast fashion world?
Right. Well, okay, so I think everyone's, standard answer is they talk about they saw the true cost on Netflix and it changed their life, and I'm really no different in that sense. I saw the true cost at some point in high school, which is a little bit ironic because whenever I watched it, I I was heavily into like my H&M phase where that's all that I wore. Um and I think a lot of people, I think the true cost is like it's so valuable to the sustainable fashion community in the sense that it is a very good like first place to start. I've had a lot of friends who have watched that and then texted me and been like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that XYZ and I feel like I need to start doing XYZ. Do you have recommendations for where I go from here?" And I love hearing that. Um for some reason I was not I watched the true cost and I was like, okay, I know this is bad, but I don't really know what I'm supposed to do from here. So then I continued on through high school and I found myself in a cycle, which I think that a lot of teenagers and young adults, or at least girls, do, unfortunately, which is you make money and then you spend all that money on clothes that suck. And then you make more money and then you spend more money on these clothes. And so what I was finding was I had this ginormous closet that every 6 months I would go through and would, put in a donate pile or a giveaway pile. There would be all of these clothes with price tags still on them that I had never worn. And from there, that was whenever I kind of just started to question. I was like, there's something not right about this, about the cycle, about me consuming this, why I'm buying it, where these clothes are going, and where they're coming from. And so while it was definitely self-motivated in some sense, I caught on really quick after.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely have recognized a similar pattern in myself as well. And it's kind of toxic.
Right. No, it's definitely toxic. And I especially, I mean, how could you not though? How could, if you're, I think that we're definitely, especially like late 90s, early 2000s kids were raised on the like mall culture of like going to the mall as a social event. Um, and I mean, I think like the very root of shopping is something that has historically been social. So we get to the age where we make money, and like that's what we know to do, is to spend it.
Yeah, that is, gosh, that is such an insightful comment. I have never even really thought about the truth behind that, but there have been so many times, like when I first started to make the transition, I just stopped buying stuff, and
Right.
I would have friends would come home from college and we would be just like, oh yeah, let's all go to the mall. And then I was caught in this weird, what am I even doing? I'm not buying, I'm
Right.
not buying anything. And then I felt like I was being kind of like a stick on the mud. I wasn't
Right.
having fun with everyone else.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I've never thought about that, Sydney, but that is totally the truth. So that actually leads really perfectly into my next question, which is kind of based on the fact that a couple weeks ago I did an episode just talking about how fads, and like consumer trends kind of lead to overconsumption and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I would say they totally lead into that weird cycle of just
Right.
buying and then being like, I don't like this.
Right.
So, have you ever found any particular fads that caused you to buy a whole bunch of clothes that you just actually never ended up using or just wore a couple
Yeah,
times?
absolutely. I most of my high school was spent doing that. Of course, I can name some more specific trends, like the A-line button-down skirts, which they never really click with me, but I have bought so many of them in hopes that they would. I just think in total, I spent a lot of money on trends, not really because I liked them, but because they were available in my size. Most trends I find are produced for and then marketed towards straight size women. So I very much latched onto this mentality of like, okay, Forever 21 made this skirt in my size, so I have to get it because how else will I know if I like it or not? And it's the only option for me. And I think that plus size women as a whole are much more at risk of being targeted with that you have no other option mentality of marketing. I think in general though, straight size, plus size, whatever. Fast fashion marketing definitely targets, you know, um, younger women who don't really have a sense of what they want to wear, and that's whenever you get into the micro trend cycle. So I definitely was susceptible to that and fell into that. I mean, that's a big part of like the cycle of just spending and not knowing what is my style, what do I like, and kind of feeling forced to try everything out because I didn't really know or have another option.
Ah, that actually is like the perfect segue. And you also kind of covered my next question, which is, yeah, like I think that there's so many, I should say, underlying messages about body image in the fast fashion world. So, what do you think body image has to do with sustainable fashion? And I'm going to kind of add the added question, like
Right.
how did figuring out your personal style help you to buy more sustainably? And also like accepting your body type. How does that help you to buy more sustainably?
Yeah, well, I think definitely most people would not correlate body image and slow fashion, upon first glance. I think if you break it down and look at how body image and just fashion, not slow fashion, not fast fashion, but just fashion in general, how those two go hand in hand, you can then kind of tie in the components of slow fashion. Fast or fashion today is very much promoting shrinking yourself, and diet culture and the quick fix mentality of just like this trend will fix how you feel about yourself. Okay, let's go to the next trend. And that cycle happens 52 weeks a year. Um, and if you think of someone with a poor body image, I would describe someone like that as uncertain or maybe unsure of their worth, or maybe even in some instances scared. And so you take those characteristics and you apply those feelings to fashion in general, and it very much creates a goose chase mentality where if you have poor body image and you're really unsure of what your style is, you're just constantly searching for what is the next quick fix or what is going to make me feel a little bit better. Um, I find that slow fashion is much more holistic and almost incredulous to that need that fast fashion forces upon us. Sustainable fashion is, for me at least, buying what you love and you'll get use out of, which I think, if done right, comes from knowing yourself and knowing your body. And in the end, I think that body image does end up correlating to the manner in which we consume fashion. Um, Slow fashion and good body image both very much have to do with not trying to fit into these pre-made boxes that are marketed to us and instead doing right by ourselves. So I think that that goes back to in high school, whenever I felt like I didn't have options or I didn't really know what I liked, I just kept searching and kept buying and kept searching and buying. And towards college and going into college, I had a real shift in my what I kind of considered as an acceptable body image, and had some real breakthroughs. And from that, I started to see my style kind of become more, I don't want to say refined. I always say I'm picky. But yeah, I definitely consume less because I am able to look at an item and say, you know what, this is really cute and I like it, but it's not for me. Which I think bad body image or having poor body image or being uncertain definitely leads into more consuming unconsciously. And then again, you can't blame the consumer who has bad body image. Or at least I would give less fault to those consumers in the sense that they are being targeted. But I definitely think that good body image can really, really has the chance to transform how much you consume and how you go about consuming fashion.
Yeah, I'm like taking notes because I have so many questions and like comments about just everything that you just said and kind of unpacking that. And I think the first kind of sub question I would say comes kind of from personal experience. And that is, I definitely, when I was more, I guess I would say, absorbed in the fast fashion world, back when I was still actually could swallow buying from Forever 21, or brands like that, or H&M, I felt like there was a very clear image, and I could almost describe to you what this woman would look like. That is the ideal woman that you should be, and that is a story written by fast fashion marketers. Would you say that you've experienced the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. And especially, I think that it almost gets a little sticky too with like when talking about plus size fashion, because even, there's a lot of companies who like to say, oh, we do plus size and we're so inclusive. And then you look at the images that they portray of plus size women, and it's women who still have, they're I don't want to say that they're not real bodies, but they are not representative of what the average plus size woman's body is built like. And so even plus size, straight size, I think that message is is forced upon women of all sizes.
Absolutely. I remember, I think I was like 12 or something like that. And I was online, it's something like Forever 21 or something. And they were doing their plus size and straight size. And even that, just like the separation between those two, I think is a whole discussion in and of itself,
Right.
separating. But I remember looking at, they had given like the model sizing breakdown, like what her waist was or whatever, her height and
Right.
weight. I was like, oh my gosh, I am the size of this plus size model, and I was like 12 years old at that point. And that was just like mind blowing to me. And looking back at that, I'm like, I don't think that I guess I had never thought of myself as like a plus size at that point. And I don't even think I was wearing plus size clothing, but they were using a woman that was just not representative, like you said, of the spectrum of what a body could / should or would
Right.
look like, it was just such a weird moment for me because I was like, what? This is not truthful at
Right.
all. Yeah, it was just such an interesting moment. And I think then my next question would be like, how do you think predominantly, and I know that this is not always the case, and there's thankfully a lot of discussion about this, but how do you
Mhm.
think the brands that are trying to partake in slow fashion, what is the difference in how they're presenting their models and how they're talking about body image?
Well, I think that a lot of the slower, more ethical brands are, well, and I say a portion because there are definitely some. I was just talking today to, or maybe it was a couple days ago. I cannot remember who I was talking to about Everlane and how frustrated I am that I want to shop from Everlane so bad and they just won't make plus sizes. And then, there are people who will pass off and they say, well, they make size 14 and 16. And I'm like, awesome. That's just the tip of the iceberg, though. And so I say, a portion. But I do see a trend with slower fashion, smaller brands. They're, already progressive in thought in terms of sustainability. And so oftentimes they also adopt the inclusivity aspect of, branding. And I definitely tend to see in the slow fashion community more models that are representative of a real untouched body, or a woman that is wearing clothes and isn't her identification doesn't rest in what she's wearing or what her body looks like. It's clothes. And I hope to see more of that in the future. Just the marketing that's a little bit more of like, here is our product, and we're going to leave it at that, versus here is this woman and she's a size 8 and she's wearing this skirt from ASOS that we just like it took 2 weeks to design, and here it is, and it's $40 and we have a 20% off coupon. Have fun. Like,
I love
um,
that.
I think that I think that slow fashion is very much more, taking a step back and looking at what goes into the process. And I love, I've been seeing a lot of brands recently do features on their social media where they talk about what actually goes into making their product. Especially love like price breakdowns, which I find to be something much more relevant in the sustainable fashion community than anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think honestly talking about pricing for sustainable goods is an entire episode in of itself because it
Definitely.
gets into an icky situation with like exclusivity and a whole bunch of different stuff, but it's also important to talk about like why stuff is so expensive and how we feel when we buy that and how it can be good or bad or whatever. But the next question that I would ask is kind of based on the idea that everyone has a different definition of sustainable fashion, I think, or slow fashion. And there are kind of like subcategories, especially for me, where if I'm looking at a brand, things that are really important to me is that they're using like recycled or natural biodegradable fibers and that they're fair trade and that they're like not doing a ton of touch-ups, but everyone has a different list, of stuff that they want to
Right.
see. So I guess my question to you would be like, what is your list of kind of I would say, not certifications, but I guess of morals that you look for when you're buying from like quote slow fashion or sustainable fashion brands?
Yeah, I'd say my definition again is such an umbrella term. To me, sustainable should mean inclusive of the earth and the people in it. So, I mean, if you want to break that down into a more micro level, I acknowledge sustainable fashion as fashion that is designed with the planet and the consumer in mind in a way which respects the producers of that garment, and as well as the people buying the clothing. So having inclusive sizing, not photoshopping models, being straightforward with the consumer. And I know that like the hashtag susty realm of Instagram can get very confusing because a lot of it seems to pertain mostly to the ecological aspects of sustainability, which are, of course, great and needed and important. But something that I've always been very concerned about is ethics, which to me is a cornerstone of sustainable fashion. And we definitely hear less of it. Mary Alice Duff of Alice Alexander did a really good story feature the other day in which she talked about sustainability and like the tendency to talk more like earth than human, so to speak. And she said it so well. She said, talking about the environment and the earth is just so much prettier and easier to most people to talk about than poverty. And I mean, I think that that is just some brutal, honest truth there. So I I consider sustainable fashion to include, sustainability in terms of like you said, recycled material and fibers, and um, materials that don't, that don't include polyester, microplastics. I think that that is just as important as making sure that the workers are being paid a fair wage, and that the models aren't being retouched and are also being paid a fair wage. And um, so I would like to see the sustainable fashion community embrace that more and acknowledge it, and learn that like these are hard conversations to have about the effect that clothing industry has on humans. Um, and it can be uncomfortable at times, but I think we're kind of moving a little bit more towards that. And so I know that's a really long definition, but I definitely think that sustainability should mean sustainable for, you, the consumer, in the sense of you should know what you're getting, and um, it should be marketed in a way that's ethical. The earth, in the sense of course, what we are consuming should not be further damaging the earth, and whoever is involved in creating those clothes, whether it be a designer who is running a smaller business and it's a one woman or man show, or in the sense of if you do have seamstress, workers or a staff, that those people are also, being respected and paid fairly and treated well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that finding brands that are doing all those things, if you're really truly picky about it, is like it's a challenging thing. And then also having it fit your style is like a whole nother discussion. Um,
Right.
but I definitely agree with you. Like, I think I would say that those kind of three tenets, kind of like having it be fair trade and understanding the value of like work and time, and honoring that for people, and also trying to have like a zero net impact, or like even a positive carbon impact. All those things are great things. So then I guess my next question would be, we've talked a lot about how marketing can affect women's body images, and how that issue with kind of causing people to feel less than, or like they have to be cool, leads to overconsumption and just buying stuff we don't need or like or whatever. So then how do we fix that? I guess the question would be, how have you found good ways to remind yourself of your own beauty, or how do you fight kind of body shaming and low self-esteem so that you can come at buying clothes with a healthy mindset that doesn't lead to that overconsumption?
Yeah, well, I mean, you got me on this one because as a marketing student, I could talk all day about this, but I will try to keep it short. In short, I would say this: that the cornerstone of marketing obviously is selling an idea to a consumer that makes them see themselves using that product. Um, for most fast fashion, and I just say fashion brands in general, this idea is someone that is, this airbrushed thin woman with incredibly long legs and glowy skin. And the problem is fashion does not fix that, and it doesn't make you anyone else. So in this preying on your insecurities type marketing, companies are really easily able to drive consumers into whatever micro trend they've decided to sell next. And especially in the age of the internet, where it starts so young, so that by the time young girls are at like the money making age, they feel like they're already immersed in this cycle. um And also part of this, I think we've seen a shift in the past couple years. Um, and where this is really going wrong now is with greenwashing and, companies using the popularity and recent, I would say, conversation surrounding sustainability as a marketing tactic, which is, another type of monster in itself. But I think fashion marketing done right should just educate the audience or the potential consumer and empower them by showing them diversity in the marketing image and then backing away for that. And for me, I think that good marketing all starts with an incredible product, which really just sells itself. Um, and so going back to like talking about my own, body image and self esteem, I would say that, you know, it's important to be mindful of your own body image in a sense that you can, you unlock this ability to say, okay, I really like this skirt. I know I'm not going to look like this model in it or may not look like this model in it, but I like it anyway. And so I am going to get good use out of it. Or kind of catch tendencies, which I still catch myself doing at some points where I'm like, do I really like this or do I really like the way that the model appears in it? Like Reformation, which I could go on and on about Reformation's plus sizes, but they recently launched like a few items that are inclusively sized. And there's this dress that I like. It's not my style, and it's like I haven't done this in a very long time, but I caught myself the other day about to buy this stupid dress that I've been looking at for a month now. And I realized it was like, I don't think I would like this dress on me, nor is it my style, but just this image, all of these, this photo shoot that they use is she's in a forest and she's like in this field and her hair is blowing in the wind. I'm like, I want to be that. So I think having a sense of self and being able to like go back to your body image and your self-esteem and your self-worth and saying, okay, I'm not like this and I don't want this and I don't want to change myself. And also, I mean, I think just like reminding myself of my worth in general, helps a lot to contribute to that. I was raised in a household, fortunately, where I was raised on affirmations and like the law of attraction. When I was little and like still to this day, whenever I would say something negative, my grandma would go, cancel, cancel, cancel. And she would make me say 3 affirmations to cancel out, so to speak, the negative thought that I said. So if I was like, I'm going to fail this math test, she would be like, cancel, cancel, cancel. You are going to pass this math test and you are capable of passing this class and you have the ability to study efficiently. So I very much carried this mentality into, like consuming and just body image in general, in the sense of like speaking the thoughts that I wanted to feel into existence. And that has really worked for me. Also, Instagram, which I think is funny too, because I very much consider Instagram as a safe space. And for my job, I intern as a social media a planner and intern. And so I love social media, and I think a lot of people actually view social media as like their downfall or a source of like grief for them, in the sense, not necessarily grief, but they of comparison, and lowered body image. And I would say that I have been very particular about creating like a safe space online of women who not only build me up, but just act as a source of inspiration. Um, I when I created my Ohhhhhh account, I went in with the mentality of just wanting to have a group of, big, small group, I don't care, just a group of women who all felt safe talking about the hardships of body image and being different sizes and trying to shop sustainably, and what that includes, the trials and errors of trying to purchase more ethically. And so I think whenever I'm feeling down and um, I feel more susceptible to being like, okay, I'm just gonna go on ASOS. I'm able to like go back on Instagram and look at all of these women that I follow, and I'm like, oh, okay, here are like diverse bodies and women that I like, and they're wearing brands that I really like and support. Um, so for me, I guess it does go back to Instagram, which is ironic, but um, I think starting out by creating a safe space. And I heard someone recently say, like Instagram is your space. So if you need to like block whoever, it was Whitney Catalano of the Trust Your Body Project. She said, if you feel like you need to block someone, then block them. Like social media is your safe space. And so I very much adopted that and used it to kind of build myself up in moments where I feel like I have poor body image or I'm having a bad day. And also talking about it is something that has really helped, because I think that there is a conversation that lacks in talking about like, hey, you know what? I'm really confident most of the time on here, but I'm having a day that I'm just really struggling. And I've been surprised to see so many women like jump in on the conversation and be like, girl, me too, I know. Or just, tell me something that they like to do that helps them. I mean, if you can find a way to create a safe space on Instagram, I think that can be used as a great tool in, checking yourself and making sure that you have people or like sources of inspiration to build you up.
Yeah, I was drawn to your account just for so many reasons, but also because side story here, and this probably won't go into the actual episode because it's so long. And this is like I think I want to do a episode in and of itself just talking about Instagram, because that is such a huge space for so many of us that are working to get this message out about sustainable fashion. But I am just not one that is in any way inclined to be on social media. Like, and I think there is a whole bunch of levels to why. And maybe that comes from low self-esteem or blah, 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 but I just am not. And I love how you explained the idea of, yeah, like your social media account, everyone's social media account is their own space. And for such a long time, I did not understand that at all. Like, I just thought I had to follow all of the people that, like in high school, I was nice to and was kind of friendly with, and then they would go home and have these beautiful Instagram accounts, and would spend time in like the spray tanning booth and 2 hours at the gym. And I'm like trying to do all this stuff and trying to make the world a better place, blah, blah, blah. But I don't have the time to look like that, And then I would genuinely like these people, but then their feed would just make me feel like shit about myself,
Absolutely.
And I think there is, like you mentioned, blocking, and the idea of like, there is a lot of discussion about, yeah, you want to block people that are aggressive or bad, mean people, But then I think I wish we had a larger discussion about like, how do you designate that maybe actually a person is not a bad person at all, but their content is not helpful, it doesn't serve you, and how to draw that line? That's such a huge discussion, I think.
Oh, I was just going to say I very much relate to that in the sense of for so long and even still, I would hear people say, and like I very much had the mentality of like, okay, well, if you don't like it, don't follow it. But then I started to realize that it wasn't about me liking or not liking who I followed on Instagram, because all of the people that I follow or that follow me, like I like them, cool. But what I started to realize is like there are people that I follow who it's nice and it's, I'm friends with them, but maybe that necessarily isn't good for me. Most recently, I have a family friend who I really look up to, and she's just like a really cool woman. And she was posting about how she was starting this account and it was going to be, like this new experience for her. And I was like, great, okay, like I'm so ready for this. So she's like, she builds up her first post, okay, and then like the first post drops, and it's a Weight Watchers Instagram, which like no hate. I am not here to judge, but as like a former binge eater and someone who is like very much, I have to constantly check myself in terms of like making sure that I am not falling back into diet culture. I had to take a moment to step back and be like, I want to follow her and I love this woman, but for me, it's not good and it's not conducive to keeping Instagram as like a safe space for me, which is so hard to do. And also it feels harsh to be like, I'm just going to block her because again, like we're not even talking about someone that I'm like, I don't really like you, or, I'm talking about someone that I genuinely like and appreciate. It's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah, and again, like I think it would be really interesting just to hear your input on all of this stuff, but I think creating a safe space not only on Instagram but also outside of Instagram, like just looking at yourself in the mirror. I love how you talked about affirmations, and something I found actually a lot to help, and I learned this when I was going through yoga teacher training. It's just like mantras, similar sort of an idea of just like repeating, trying to get your positivity to negativity ratio in a place where it's like 50% at least to like 25,
Right.
just trying to nurture a situation where I love the idea of cancel, cancel, cancel. Try and overweigh. I love that so much, Sydney. Like I haven't heard that in such a simple way, but yeah, trying to fight it in a way where it's so hard to completely say. I think we would all love to say that we're just like, yeah, one morning I woke up and I loved myself and I never thought negative thoughts about myself again. It's like whoever does that, I want to know how.
Right.
But cultivating, maybe like looking at as a net positive. I want to
Exactly.
have a net positivity towards myself. I think is probably, like you said, just the best way to go, trying to cancel out or just drown all of our sadness about ourselves in positive thoughts. That I would echo that has definitely helped me to get towards a space where I'm there. But also, this episode is going, usually I'm not like this, but there's so much to unpack here. I It is an interesting thing to talk about honesty too, and I love how you mentioned, and the reason I was drawn to your account is talking about body image and loving our bodies is an important message, but it's also really important, and I would love to hear your input on this, to be honest about the fact that some days, even if we overwhelmingly do like ourselves, some days we just hate our bodies or just are so frustrated with this one thing, and we just sit on that. And I think it's important to be more honest with others that there is a roller coaster that exists. And I'm sure that you experience, I see that on your account, but have you found that there is in your community in Oh Honey, that is predominantly what people are talking about? Or do you think that a lot of people cover up and just try and make their message, I guess you could say, more marketable by just talking about positive body image,
I see a lot of, I kind of see a couple sides to, like body image and that messaging that goes on Instagram. I do see some people who kind of cover it up and keep just the pretty side on Instagram. But I do see less of that, at least in the people that I follow and who follow me. Some of the people who aren't as active about it are definitely people who probably are just more private people in general. And so I totally respect that. If you don't want to talk about it, if you like my best friend, I love her to death, but she is like she made her first Instagram post the other day in like 2 years. And like she never posts on anywhere. And as someone who like I wear my heart on my sleeve, I like you can say hi to me and I will give you a 5-minute conversation in return at the store. And so I am so external, and I just feel like it's, since I am comfortable about talking about this, it's important for me to be honest and say like, okay, today I'm not feeling it. And this is just a part of, it doesn't mean that I'm failing at body image, but it's just important to acknowledge. And I see that in the same way of talking about like recovering from disordered eating or eating disorders in general. Um, I've always been like, I've had, thoughts where I'm like, I feel like I need to go on a diet again. Or just having like, and again, I reference Whitney Catalano from the Trust Your Body Project because I am a religious listener. But she always talks about having diet thoughts. And so, like she always talks about having a diet thought, and you think about like, I need to lose weight, or I should probably get back on Weight Watchers. Where do you go from there? Okay, well, you assess the situation and you recognize the reality of it, which is, okay, I'm having this thought. And then you say, that's okay. It's okay that I have these thoughts. What's important is they're becoming, fewer and further in between each other. And then I can move on. And it's just like, my, I think my little brother said this the other day, and I was like, yeah. He said, it's not a bad life. It's just a bad day. And I was like, exactly. Like, I just think that that's important to portray on Instagram. And, I definitely don't criticize other women who either aren't comfortable talking about that on Instagram or just aren't um, as extroverted in that sense of, putting everything out there. But as I am very much like that, I feel like it's important for me to say on days where, because I do put out such a message of, like, I'm really, confident in myself and I have really good body image that I've worked up to for so long. But there are days where I look in the mirror and I'm like, I just cannot find an outfit that I like, or I am just not feeling it today. I'm not feeling myself. And I think that's important. And it's the same. I feel the same way about consuming like sustainable fashion too, in the sense of I want to promote sustainable fashion as much as possible, but like there are pieces of fast fashion that show up on my account, and like I want to talk about it. I want to talk about like how I still have fast fashion items in my closet because these are items that I've had since high school and I really like them, or how I bought a skirt off of ASOS the other day because I have been looking at this skirt for like 2 months and have not found a better option. So, and there's not any other brands that make plus size skirts in this exact pattern that I wanted. And so I bought this skirt, which I think then can be translated to in both body image and talking fashion. Then people can easily be like, oh, you're a cherry picker. And I think especially for like plus size women in the sustainable fashion community, that can be really easily a label that's put on them. When in reality, it's like if when you have a lack of options or you don't know what your options are, that's just the reality of the situation. Is you might have a diet thought or a bad, body image day, or you might have to buy socks from Target every now and then. Like those are just topics that come up that I think are, it's much more important to have conversations that are like, hey, I'm doing XYZ, or I don't really feel that good today, versus constantly having that image of just being like, I am, have perfect body image and this is great. Because whenever like viewers of that see that, when they see that perfect image, it's deterring, and it definitely contributes to that negative like source of comparison where you're like, okay, well, I'm never going to measure up to this because there's no way that I can have perfect body image because this isn't even in the realm of attainability for me. So why attempt this at all?
Yeah, I love that. And I think the theme that I heard through all of that, and it's really interesting, is that something you mentioned really early on is just the idea that we don't need to have like this saying, we don't need to have 5 perfect environmentalists. We don't need to have 5 people that have this
Right.
perfect body image, whether they're plus size or not. We just have to have a whole bunch of people that are just trying to get there, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe if all of us try to get there and fail while we're doing it, we can have a conversation about maybe opening up more options and creating a situation where it's just more accessible. And I love your account, so I'm going to do a shout out
Thank
to Oh
you.
Honey in the note that. But I commend you for having that honesty and for embracing the situation that we live in, where there are not a lot of options for a lot of people, and trying to at least get there halfway is better than not trying at all. I think
Right.
that's a really important takeaway. So then, just kind of as we wrap it up, because I know we could probably go for a long time about all this different stuff, what outside of slow fashion, sustainable passion, have you changed
Mhm.
about your life to live? I would like to open this up not only in a more ecologically sustainable way, but in a socially sustainable way.
Yeah. Well, of course, in like the ecological realm, I do the whole like I am like a religious bagu user and metal straw utensil kit kind of thing. But I those are all kind of things that are representative of like how I have outside of just, you know, fashion have tried to live a little bit more sustainable. Because whenever I try to pick up like monstrous tasks at once, it always fails. Something like recent for me is makeup wipes. I did not know like how wasteful, and or it's not that I didn't know. I just didn't never thought about how potentially wasteful makeup wipes are, and just how like they're single use, you throw them in the trash can, and they're most of them are like non-biodegradable, and they just, they sit there. I think I read, gosh, I want to say I read somewhere recently that makeup wipes are like the either the first or second like most appearing beauty product in landfills. So I've been trying to use like washcloths. Like that is, it's such a simple switch that it took no time for me, and it took no effort, and it wasn't hard, and it's not like I'm having to really sacrifice anything crazy. I'm just not using makeup wipes. And again, like that goes back to the honesty of like, will I probably use a makeup wipe again in my life? Of course. Like I still have the pack of makeup wipes that were in my vanity 6 weeks ago. I didn't just throw those away. But just I think that like little things like that are things that like have added up to me to just living a little bit more sustainably as a whole. Another thing for this year that I've been trying to focus on is food waste. Um, I believe that the statistic is 40% of all food in America goes to waste. And again, I am not 100% sure, but I believe um, the number is 1 in 6 families in America are food insecure. Um, and I think this is I'm kind of at the stage now where I was a very long time ago in, my journey with like buying, consuming like sustainable fashion, where I was at this point where I was like, I don't really know where to go from here, but I'm going to try these things that I think might help, and we'll see where we go from there. And that's kind of where I am with like food waste right now. Um, I don't really know. I don't have like a perfect guide right now. It's just something at the beginning of the year I was like, I'm just going to try this year, seeing like what works and what doesn't. And maybe in a year or two I'll be a little bit better at this. And so this year I've been trying to like make little changes to like use all my food before I go to the store, or make sure things don't go bad. Um, and so I think that definitely, and like that's something that I'm so bad at, but like it was in me realizing, I'm like buying this food and then I'm not even eating it before it goes to waste. um I think that was like another big wake up call for me. So um so yeah, I'm definitely I try to kind of get innovative in the ways that I can be a little more sustainable because, again, like living in the South, we can't just like use public transportation. We like we have to use like AC all the time. And like just being in my car, I mean, I'm in my car so much. And there are definitely just little aspects that I can't really change. So instead of being like, I'm going to walk as much as I can because like, no, I'd get killed. um, Instead, I have to think of some other ways which I normally wouldn't, discover on my own, in which I can kind of reassess like what I'm doing, how I'm consuming. Um, and yeah, it's definitely a work in process. I wouldn't ever say that I'm like the beacon of living sustainably. I've just made a ton of tiny changes. And I'd say overall, those changes, they do add up and they do matter. And they matter to your health in the end. And going back to like body image, living more mindfully and taking a holistic approach has made me so much more appreciative of my body in general. And I think just like consuming slower as a whole, like not even pertaining to fashion, but fashion, food, beauty products, what else have you, just taking a step back. Like I love to online shop. But I've learned in recent years to just like take a step back and be like, okay, I don't want this, or I don't need this. And just consuming slower in general has led overall to just like a decreased anxiety that I feel like I have to just like constantly be on the lookout for like some imaginary item that I have yet to discover that's just going to change my life. And I think that taking a little bit of a slower approach to buying, especially fashion, has made me scale back and worry less about like, what am I going to find next? And it's definitely, I mean, that definitely plays into, like my mental health and just like overall happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, and more people just like taking the first step and asking ourselves, how can I do this in a better way? Challenging ourselves to maybe take a little bit more effort at the start to figure it out because it's better for everybody. I think that's such a selfless thing. So how can I send people over to you? How can people find you and follow you and be a part of your community?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say if you're someone who is just tired of, um, you know, listening to all of these messages that are like about body positivity, but it's not the full truth, or they're about, sustainable fashion, but they're just a little too perfect for you. I think Ohhhhhh is like the important conversation, the important like melting pot of all of those conversations that kind of get a little sticky and complicated. And, it's just like an honest place where, I can talk and I can ask questions about other people and admit things that I am not perfect, on and with. And, but also I feel like definitely the people who are interacting with me feel the same way as well. So I'm at Ohhhhhh and it's 9 H's. And yeah. Yeah, I mean, if anyone who, I think it's a great place for anyone who just feels like they don't really fit the boxes of like the sustainable fashion, like the eco community or the body positivity community, and they just feel a little bit lost in Instagram. I think and I'm trying to make sure that Ohhhhhh is a place where we can just like honestly talk about those issues.
Isn't Sydney awesome, gals? I just loved getting to sit down and talk with her about all of the different things that we covered. Again, if you're looking to follow Sydney, find her at Ohhhhhh on Instagram. As usual, make sure to follow if you're listening on Spotify and subscribe if you're listening on iTunes. And go follow us on Insta at Stylish and Sustainable if you aren't already. Most of the community happenings and fun things going on in the Stylish and Sustainable community happen on the Instagram account. You might even be able to win a free essential oil. You guys have a really fantastic week. Sending good vibes.